and he's ploughed every single penny he's got. Him, his wife, he's ploughed every single penny he's got to build, a future for his children. And I tell you, he sat in my garden yesterday and said he hates waking up in the morning. He hates milking cows. He hates what he does. And he wishes to God he'd never gone into it. This is a guy, I can tell you, 10 years ago, was so driven, so enthusiastic, so loving life. It makes no sense that what these processes and governments have done to so many people, mentally, physically, emotionally, it's put them on their knees.
I'm Carson Jorgensen. And this is the Carson Jorgensen Podcast. Hey everybody, thanks for joining us today. Today I have a dear friend, Gareth Jones, join me today, and we talk about a lot of the things that agriculture is really struggling with. The red meat industry in particular, these government regulations. Man, Gareth is an absolute outspoken person. He doesn't hold back on what he sees or believes. And we talk deeply about what's happening, from mental health to government policies to this botched agenda for climate. Guys, this is one you're not going to want to miss, so stick around. Thanks for joining me today. I appreciate you taking your time. You and I are both busy this time of year with sheep, but hey, explain to everybody kind of how you got into this, how you got started in it all, how you got drug into the mixture like between politics and agriculture.
Oh God, that's a really good question. Many moons ago, I I do a bit of television work, and I was on a television political program, and there was our local MP, member of Parliament there, and I asked a question, and I didn't get the answer I was looking for, and I tend to tell you now I'm still in that same situation. When I ask a politician or anybody within within that realm, they never answer a question. So it's been driven by frustration, by truth, and by just trying to fight for good people, good honest people, good working people, people that want to pay the taxes, but they want the taxes to go to the right people, to the right places. It's about getting the message out there about food production and farming, and however we look at it, and however we believe, politicians, policies are a big part of what we do every single day. So we have to stand up, we have to fight, we have to make sure that the general public understand the frustrations and the problems we have as an industry, because I really do believe for many years, as farmers, ranchers, um, anybody within the countryside, I think we've buried our heads in the sand for too long, and just carried on with our work. And governments like that, supermarkets like that, they don't want us engaging with the consumer and customer. They don't want us educating them. They don't want them to understand that cheap food comes at a cost to the farmer, to the animals, to the environment, and to a lot of other things. So, that's what drives me. That's my belief, and that's why I'm maybe pretty controversial.
Yeah, well, to me, you're not, and that's why it resonates so hot. But you talked about two things there that I think I really want to dive into, and the one is cheap food. And I've told people this for a long time: that cheap food comes with a cost. It's very akin to what you're saying. But in the quest to create cheap food that they push for so long, we have created processes and factory farms and those type of things that are frankly not a great thing. And you see a lot of people who are holistically trying to manage things and they're trying to bring back, but everything suffers when you try to push for cheap food, because the farmer, the rancher suffers because they're not making the money. The consumers suffer because they're not getting as good of a product, and the environment suffers because now you're thrashing the ground that you're working on. And far too often, it's the farmer rancher that gets the bad rap for these cheap food policies and the things that we're doing, and the agricultural processes, because yeah, a lot of things work, and they work really great, but we have created this problem now. So why do you think that is, and where do you see it going from here? Because to me, it's going to continue to be a problem until one, food gets more expensive, or two, something else gives.
I'm going to disagree on one thing you said, that we created this problem. I don't think we created the problem.
That's
Okay,
fair. No, you're right.
they created this problem. Okay, because if we look after this land and how we manage it, every policy that's come in from governments, and I'm talking worldwide, not just in Britain, they've always been driven with their ethos. They haven't really ever
Mm,
looked at the people that work that land, that protect that land, that look after, not just the animals that are on it, but the wildlife, the environment, keeping clean water, having
mm,
good soil, feeding that soil with natural fertilizers, manure, sheep, cows, ponies, pigs, chickens. These things can be done. When you stick them in a shed in the millions, yeah, that's fine. And that's why you're able to have a chicken for $4.
hmm
That's why it's there. That's your choice. If you go to France, you don't see many chickens for $4 because they're still connected to their food and the farmers and the processes, and the government there has been, very supportive. So, well, I think by saying they, I think we then point the finger at our government and our supermarkets. And I don't want to say that there's no blame on us. There is partial blame, because it was the way we were
Yeah,
pushed to
and
get
we went
bigger.
there. Hmm.
Yeah, well, as a business, what choice did some of these businesses have?
Yep,
If you want to survive, you had to have more land, or you had to have more animals, or you had to push this, or you had to use more antibiotics, or you have to do this, and then you're flogging things. You're flogging the land,
yep,
and then you're not creating that culture of protecting the environment, the water, and everything. And I think we can learn a lot from our forefathers. I think we need to look back to the 1920s and 30s, when we had a lot of mixed farms, where everybody had some chickens, some pigs, some, horses. I know it sounds like rose tinted glasses, but all these things were rotational. They moved things around. They supplied the local community. We didn't have avocados flown in from Mexico, where now the Mexicans can't even afford the avocados.
right.
And they're the people that are saying, "Well, I'm going vegan and I'm saving the planet," and they're cutting swathes and swathes of land out there and forests so they can grow more avocados. So, we and I mean we as society, not we as farmers,
Sure.
we as society have a part to play in that. But us as farmers have the biggest role. And that's why we have to stand fast, stand hard, stand strong now, and have a fair price for what we're producing. But educate, the people, the consumer and the customer, because it pees me off when I read statistics of one third of the food that's produced in the UK goes into landfill. One
Goes to
third,
waste.
you know,
Hmm.
and I look at people's plates in some restaurants, and I'll see them. They eat quarter of it, say half of it, and I'm thinking, you've got no idea what it took to produce that food. If you knew what it took to put that food on your plate, even though you're paying for it, if you knew what it took to put that food on your plate, you would not be wasting it. So I
Yeah.
think we have to adapt the whole ethos of what we're doing, educating people, building a better world around what we're doing as a industry by educating people, eating seasonal, you know, eating regenerative farming practices, so people know that that grass-fed beef or that grass-fed lamb is a lot better for you. We've cut back on our concentrates. We're looking at new ways. I'm using seaweed on the ground. We haven't gone organic or anything like that. We're still using artificial fertilizer, but we're
Yeah.
weaning ourselves off it. As a business, you just can't turn the tap off. We've got
Yeah.
a lot of stuff. So I'm looking at ways to find new methods of being able to keep the same stock, but by bringing hardly any, imported food into the farm and start to be more self-sufficient as our forefathers would have been.
Yeah, and try to build your communities in the same way as you do, and two, I think in this instance, you and I know, I'm sure closely and personally, farmers are just trying to survive most of the time, and they're trying to outrun the bank, and it's an unfortunate thing that that is always the case, and I don't know in what world it's a great idea that the farmers are continually leveraged to the hilt, and rarely do you see them making money here in the states. I mean, the farm dollar is at an all-time low. So every dollar spent on food, only 10%, 10 cents, 10 cents of every dollar ends up back to the farmer. And then beyond that, the farm debt is at the highest it's ever been. The average farm debt is $1.7 million per farm. It's they are strapped to the hilt, and so they're making decisions based on survival, not based on what's best for the environment or what's best for this or any of those things anymore. And so they're caught chasing that eternal thing, like, hey, I don't want to be the one to lose my family farm, so I'm going to do whatever it takes or whatever they ask of me to pay the bill. And for far too long, they've been paid pennies on what they actually deserve and what they're actually working for. The other thing is, and two, I'd like your thoughts on this, is how do we strike, and this is something that I really come back to. We now have these giant metropolises, these huge cities, especially here in the States, to where there is no agriculture anywhere near a lot of them, and they continue to grow, and we continually have to being forced to vertically integrate to continue to feed these large amounts of people. And so farmers and ranchers are being forced to produce more food on smaller amounts of ground. And so how do we balance being big enough to feed everybody, but yet being small and agile enough to continue to take care of things the way that they should be taken care of?
That's a really difficult question to answer, but I really think, for one, we start to educate people on wasting less food, and
Mm-hmm.
we start to educate people on the nutritional density of, let's say, grass-fed beef,
Mm-hmm.
uh, lamb. There's a lot more nutrients in that protein in that meat than in your chicken. And people, will look at that $4 chicken to a $10 steak or $20 steak. I don't know how much they are out there, but and they'll look at it and think, but if you put that together and looked at the nutrients and what you're going to get, that steak's going to be a lot more value than that chicken. So I think education is key, but as well, we have to go into schools. We have to teach children that this is where milk comes from, because a lot of people have got no idea how food's produced.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh, for sure.
where your parsnips come from, where your corn comes from, where your wheat comes from, where your carrots. Teaching the next generation about food production, and then maybe getting them to respect it a little bit more. So as they grow up, they'll pay a little bit more to, the farmers market. So if you can add value to the products you've got instead of going through a big process, and we know we can't all do it.
Yeah.
It's impossible for us all to do it, and the supermarkets aren't going to go away anytime
Yeah.
soon. But the more we can do to add value to our the more we can bring revenue back into the farm. And I think if we take the farm into the cities, if we take our farms into the cities, if you understand what I mean, as in the
Mm-hmm.
process of teaching these people through social media, through television, through movies, however it is, and then taking our farm shops there. We, I get hundreds of Americans over a 12-month period here, mainly with Rick Steves tours. And there is a massive uptake on people looking for farmers, looking for local produce,
Mhm.
looking how to support, you know, the people that are producing food. I think it's out there. It's
Yeah.
how we tap into it and how we, utilize it for our own benefits, not
Mhm.
for anybody else's benefits, because we are the primary producer, and we should be taking the cream, literally, not
Sure.
everybody else.
Not the
You don't,
middleman.
yeah, yeah, but you don't mind sharing that cake. But look, there's people taking a big wedge of that cake that are putting hardly anything into that situation except sticking it on a shelf.
Oh, they're getting more than what you're getting, and literally it changes hands, and they touch it for about 45 seconds, and that's the only time they have it, yet they add their value that's more than what you're getting off of it. And farmers have really been stuck in that trap for a long time. It's you buy everything at retail and sell everything at wholesale, and that continues to be the problem. And I think too, you hit on it, that farmers for far too long, and this is something I really noticed with my family and my friends and other ranching families for a long, long time. A lot of them were extremely gun shy about telling their own story, and really speaking up about what's going on. And they didn't want, documentary crews, and they didn't want these people on their farms, and they just wanted to be left alone for far too long. Well, in that process of wanting to be left alone, everybody took advantage of them. And I truly believe that not telling our story and not spreading that. But I believe we're seeing a break in that because the media no longer controls the narrative. The big corporations don't control the narrative any longer. They are being broken up by social media, albeit TikTok or YouTube or Facebook or Instagram, all of these different platforms on X. We're able to more fully tell our story. And I want to encourage farmers and ranchers to keep telling your story. Show people what it takes. You want them to appreciate their food. Show them what it takes. You don't, and you'll know this. I mean, when you have to process a lamb, albeit has a broken leg or whatever, and you have to on farm process it for your own consumption, I'll tell you what, it brings a whole new light to not wanting to waste food,
Yeah,
to seeing that life that is given, because it takes life to survive. I mean, that's all that it is. And when you see that life go in and see it firsthand, and nobody really gets that experience, we become too disconnected from our food that it's too easy to waste it. And I think that as we continue to tell our story and encourage people to be brave and to stand up in front of people, well, as you do, as I do, as we take that time to advocate for ranchers and farmers, that it's time you stand up and tell your story so that the other side doesn't get to write that narrative.
yeah, 100%. And I think as well, we have to explain to our consumer and customers that everything they put on that plate will have a death toll. So we're
Yeah.
not just talking about the animals, we're talking about the vegetables, we're talking about salads, we're talking about the fruit. Everything will have a death toll. And I think that's important because, we're getting some of these, you know, vegans and some of these extremists saying, nothing died for me to be fed. And when I asked them the question, how much of your own food you've ever grown, and I don't think one of them's ever answered me, oh, I grow my own food. So they haven't got an iota of an idea what dies, but they'll stand outside the slaughterhouse going, oh, how cruel this is and how horrible you people are. And I think we have to challenge that because we have a freedom of choice in life to eat what we want. And I really believe that. If you're vegetarian, vegan, pescatarian,
Yeah.
flexitarian, carnivore, whatever your diet is, that's your choice.
Hmm.
But but when you mislead people with information to say that you're going to save the planet by going vegan, or nothing will die for you to have your food, well, I can tell them that I know there's more lives lost for me to get my veg, my fruit, my salad onto my plate than there is for me to get that beef or lamb onto that plate, because that would be one life. If I grow a row of carrots, I'll be killing everything,
Yeah.
the bugs. the beetles, the slugs, the snails, the rodents, the pigeons, the squirrels,
Rabbits. Yeah.
rabbits. All this is relevant to what we should be addressing when they are misleading people. And that's then an educational choice. If they still want to do that diet, crack on. And I think that needs
Yeah.
to go to schools so people can see it. And do you know what? I
Yep.
wouldn't be scared to take children into a slaughterhouse. I wouldn't be
Yeah.
scared. You know, I was very, very young when I went first time. It never bothered me. And my children the same. When
My
Christmas
children have all
comes,
seen it
yeah,
too.
when Christmas comes, we kill the turkeys here. And I think my daughter was about 5 years old when the first time, 5 or 6 years old. And then they went back to school after Christmas, and they were asking all the children, "So, what did you do over Christmas?" Oh, oh, we went out to see Santa Claus, and we went, to Iceland, and my daughter Marion, what did you do? Oh, I helped my dad kill the turkeys and pluck them and clean them, and then everybody had Christmas dinner. And I was like, "Yeah, you go, girl.
Yeah.
That's my girl." But
Yeah.
but that's the sense of honesty from a farm kid because they see it, and children are like sponges. Children are like
Mhm.
sponges, and I think today's society protect them away from reality. So they live in a Peppa Pig world, you know,
Mhm.
where Peppa Pig is running around with Mama Pig and Daddy Pig. And I'm not, discrediting that. All I'm saying is, that if you are removed from that, you don't understand where your food comes from. And then you're disconnected. And
Mhm.
then you can't really make them decisions, in my opinion. So I'd rather see children making an educational choice by seeing it firsthand and saying, "Oh, I don't want to do that. Oh, I don't want to be part of that. I'd rather do this," and then that's fine. That's fine.
Yeah.
Not letting other people misguide them, give them, misleading propaganda for them to think that a certain diet or certain way of life will change, you know, the planet, or what they eat will cause nothing to die.
Yeah. No, and I think for years, and this is where here in the States, we conservatives really got behind because we let the people with a more liberal mindset infiltrate the schools and they took all that away from them. They don't get to see that. They've been writing the curriculum here for so long that the kids are removed from that and they don't know that they have a choice. And again, back to the media, they have controlled the media and the narrative and the food pyramid. I mean, now they find out that the food pyramid that they had here was probably the biggest scam in American history, that
In the
they
world
couldn't,
history,
right, they couldn't have been more wrong. And yet nobody acknowledges that. Nobody wants to talk about this is trust the science, but you're seeing the lid come off of it. I mean, I don't know about you, but I watch. It's funny because I consume a lot of shows from the UK. I watch Cammy and the Sheep Game, and I watch Jeremy Clarkson. His show on TV is one of my favorite things to watch because he tells it what it is. But you're starting to see more and more people have an interest, as you talked about before. Do you think this is going to continue? Do you expect it to continue? And what should we be doing to make sure that it does?
oh, definitely will continue. What we need, I think, good friends with Cammy. I think Clarkson's been great for the industry, to be honest with you,
Yeah.
because he's brought in a new audience, and because he's got a massive um, platform, and he's a good communicator, so he can get
Mhm.
things over. And he's been quite brutally honest about the whole farm. Some of the things has backfired. Like he said that he'd bought the farm not to pay tax and things like that. So there's a few things that have bit him in the ass. But as an advocate, he's been great. He's brought so much positivity. But what I'd like to see is more youngsters coming in, more
Mhm.
influencers on our TikToks, more people that are not afraid to stand up and start, telling people this is what's happening. This is, this is what's been done to our industry. So the general public and the younger generations can start to relate with the farmer. I've said it a few times. You're going to need a farmer once, twice, or three times a day. And I think that's a great saying. And then
Yeah.
when you keep repeating that, people start to think then it's not supermarkets, it's not governments, it is the farmers that are the primary producer of food across the world. And they have been shot down by mainstream media, by politics, by supermarkets. We have had a foot on our neck for too long, and it's time for us to rise from the ashes like Phoenix and just say, do you know what? Enough has been enough. Now you're going to have to start to respect us because, I've said this country is sleepwalking into food shortages. There's no doubt in my mind.
Yes.
Um, yeah, and however you look at it, we're trying to get net zero over here, and energy prices going through the roof. We're now in a bit of a drought. We had the wettest bloody year last year. Um, we're fortunate, to be honest with you, that we've got a temperate climate, and we have been able to grow a lot of grass, which, marginal land, as you know, in the States, is great for the cattle. It's great for the
Hmm.
sheep. We have to protect that. We can't bring these so-called rewilders and say these sheep are so much destroying, our environments. There's nothing left. Well, look, my family's been on this farm, on this land for 375 years. We've got some of
Wow.
the rarest flora and fauna anywhere in the UK. That's because we haven't raped and pillaged that land. We protected it, even with all the government policies that have tried to change things, move things, we have protected it. And we still have the rarest flora and fauna. We still have some of the rarest birds and wildlife up there. And that is because it's been managed right for
Hmm.
generations by people that understand the land.
Yeah. No, and you touch on, I mean, it's no different here. You look at my family's land and the ranch that my family's been on for 100 years and now or more. It's use sage grouse. This is a prime example. I mean, the Wyoming sage grouse, they talk about it like it's going extinct, and we never thought that because they were all over the place on the ranch. We go up there and you see them all the time, and it's because it's been managed. But you go down the road 20 miles to the public land that's not managed, and that is run over and locked up by the environmental groups and these people who are quote unquote taking care of it. They're not. These forests have to be managed because we've gotten away from over here, letting things burn. I mean, they used to burn, and they used to have catastrophic wildfires all the time, and they don't put out small spot fires when they start, and they would go through, clean it up, and start over. Well, we don't do that anymore. We have houses built in them. We have all sorts of things, reasons why you can't let the forest burn anymore. So we don't let them burn anymore. But on the back end, they're not managing them. They're locking them up. They're not letting them log them. They're locking them up. They won't let you graze them. They won't let you do any of those things. And so you see the private land here really prosper. It really does well, but you see the public land just fail time and time and time again. And it's because of mismanagement. And that, to me, is the biggest scam of this net zero or these rewildings or all of the things. And you guys deal with it as much as anybody. That is the biggest scam of all of it.
Yeah, totally agree. And we're seeing farmland here in Wales being bought off by multinational corporations,
Mm-hmm.
where some of them are putting solar farms on them, solar panels, and some are planting trees so they can offset their carbon in their own countries. It makes no sense at all to me.
Mm-hmm.
Leave the people on the land to do what they know best, which is produce food. Yeah, look, we're not perfect. There's a few things that maybe we have to address as an industry as well.
Yeah.
But I've never come across a farmer that just wants to, go there and rape and pillage his land. There's one saying in our family, when we hand it over to the next generation, we hand that land over in a better state than what it was given to us. That's
Mm-hmm.
a great ethos, and I think that should be a little bit more across society. That we're
Sure.
thinking better. We're looking for solutions, but I at this moment in time, all I can see is governments destroying and I mean globally destroying the agricultural sector, the family
Yep.
farms. You know, Bill Gates is buying a lot of land out in the States now, isn't he? Which is frightening. And when we have these big multinational corporations and these big individuals that have money to burn, that can go in, and I don't know how much land is out there. Let's say you're getting $1,000. Well, these people can come in and give $10,000 an acre,
Yep.
and just scoop that, and that's nothing. It's nothing because it's income that it's not going to bother them. They've got that money behind them, but no commercial farmer can do that. They haven't
Yep.
got that capital to go forward. So I think we need to be looking at how governments protect these family farms. This
Hmm.
this country's just had a massive bombshell with this inheritance tax.
Oh, that's
We
brutal.
we have a 1% return, 1% return on what we are doing. I bet you we are the only industry in the world that gets a bloody
Guarantee
one
it.
percent return. It,
Nobody would
it,
keep doing it.
it's mental. It's mental. I had a farmer with me yesterday. The guy that I explained to you. So I was doing a program for. It's called S4C. It's a Welsh broadcasting corporation that makes television. So there was two Welsh speakers and an English speaker, but they were Welsh farmers, all of them. So one of the Welsh farmers is a dairy farmer, but he didn't want to be seen. So literally, we had to take him from the back. He had sunglasses on, and he was like this. That that's because he was worried that the people he supplies, the processors, would find out that he'd been speaking to me and telling me some of the things that were happening, and they was cut his contract. He's got three young children. Now he came into the industry. Okay, he came into the industry about 20 odd years ago. He was from a smaller farming background, but he's gone and he's rented a farm, and he's ploughed every single penny he's got. Him, his wife, he's ploughed every single penny he's got to build, a future for his children. And I tell you, he sat in my garden yesterday and said he hates waking up in the morning. He hates milking cows. He hates what he does. And he wishes to God he'd never gone into it. This is a guy, I can tell you, 10 years ago, was so driven, so enthusiastic, so loving life. It makes no sense that what these processes and governments have done to so many people, mentally, physically, emotionally, it's put them on their knees. People don't understand the suicide rates in globally within the industry. So one of the ladies that was here yesterday, she comes from Powys. This is not a big county; it's a small. It's a big county, but not a lot of people. It's very very rural county. 18 people within the agricultural sector have taken their own life since Boxing Day, since Christmas. It just it's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking, and things need to change. We as well need to change. We have to help each other. We just ask each other, how are you today? I think mental health at this moment, because financial stresses, government policy stresses, and as well supermarket stresses, and a lot of the red tape, a lot of the paperwork that we all have to do is putting a lot of pressure onto family farms, not just the big butch farmer, but the wives, the children. Like this guy said to me yesterday, he's snappy at his kids, because he's tired, he's just not happy, and he doesn't want to be like that. He loves his children. So these people really need to wake up and smell the bloody coffee and what they're doing to us as people.
I agree. Um, Farmers and ranchers have, at least here in the states, that they're 3.5 times more likely than the average citizen to take their own life, and it is becoming a pandemic, I would say, for them because it's tough. I mean, as I talked about earlier, these families, how many generations have been on your place? How many generations on my place? Do you really want to be the one that couldn't make it happen?
Yeah, yeah,
Is it
yeah,
better, and a lot of these men, women, they weigh this out in their mind. Is it better to end it than it is to keep and lose it? That
yeah,
way you didn't lose. And this is a stark reality that many people are facing. The bank is breathing down your neck. You're on the ropes constantly. Small things within the government that the government decides to do can set you off and finish you off in the day. uh, People dumping their milk because the government decided to make a new policy, or
yeah,
it is one thing after another, and these policies are forcing people into a corner. And this is unfortunately the thing that is becoming more and more common to talk about. And as a farming community, I think we could do a lot better job of having this and communicating with each other, and check on your friends,
yeah,
and just say, it's okay. Like, I understand where you're at, and if you have the prompting spiritually or physically or mentally, whatever it is, go check on a friend, see how they're
yeah,
doing.
yeah, yeah.
It
And
can affect us all.
there's always a solution. There's always a light at the end of the tunnel. And I think we have to push that narrative
Yeah.
to the individuals, if they are feeling low. There's people out there that can help them. There's always something we can do to find that answer to the problem.
Yeah, and be more compassionate on your friends,
Yeah,
and it carries over because the stress is being put on them too. Because I think a lot of farmers, I'm hearing the same thing from them. They feel bad that consumer prices are up, but they're like, I can't cut anymore. People come to us all the time like, why is food so expensive? I mean, it's like, I don't know, but we're not seeing it.
yeah,
It's not us that's getting it. And I mean, the bank numbers are just simply astounding, and it continues to spiral. But the one thing I have always been a firm advocate of, and you look at it multiple different ways. Before any communist regime took over, any dictator, what was the first thing they did? They went after the farmers. So the farmers are kind of that line of defense between people, because you have to have that. And if you control the food, you can control the population. It's not hard. And
yeah,
so that is another message that people, they've got to know is you have the power, and the farmers have got to start realizing what a sword they actually wield. Because if the farmers decided to stop for a couple weeks, the world comes to a grinding halt, and it stops. The things happen, and bad things happen if farmers decide to quit putting food on the table. And we have that, but yet most of them are all too kind and don't want to see people suffer and things like that. And that's why I believe that it hasn't changed.
yeah. And I believe as well there's been a bit of a global agenda worldwide, to depopulate our stocking densities, as in cows and livestock.
Yeah.
They've been literally blaming them for the so-called climate crisis. So it's cow fats and sheep burps that are the problem. Well,
Right.
I totally disagree with that. I think they are part of the solution, and
Sure.
that's what we should be driving forward, because you want bugs for dinner, you want processed food, that's your choice. It won't be for
Go
me. It
ahead.
won't be for my children. But you go ahead and eat it. And I think the less we play with our food, the better it
Hmm.
is. So keep your food simple, keep it as unprocessed as you possibly can. You see some of the processed levels that our foods are going through, and you think, oh my God, I wouldn't give that to my dog. I wouldn't give that to my dog. Uh,
Looks real similar. I mean, you look at the ingredients on the almost meat, it looks about the same as what's in your dog food.
I think I'd rather eat dog food.
Safer.
Yeah,
God. But that's what you're seeing. But in my opinion, all of this is being made possible by government regulation, and you guys are further ahead in the government regulation than we are. I mean, I see some of the policies, and I encourage everybody to go watch Jeremy Clarkson's show on Prime. There, uh, it's it's astounding what people are dealing with. And when what is his name, Charlie or whoever he is, throws his regulation at him, you can't do that. This is asinine. This is ridiculous. Why can I not? And but that's happening, and you and I have talked off air a bit about it. But for years before I got into politics, I didn't understand. I always thought that government was nefarious as all get out, and don't get me wrong, there is some of that, but don't attribute to nefariousness what you can attribute to stupidity. And a lot of these people don't understand. And they're the one making the rules. People who have never been on a farm are the ones making the rules of how animals should be raised. I mean, over there, you guys have to put, what is it, 2 RFID tags in every animal. They've all got to be tracked from birth to death. They all have to, there is a plethora of things that you have to meet that we don't hear, but are starting to creep in. In this last funding bill here in the United States, they allotted $15 million for mandatory RFID tagging in cattle in the United States, and we have fought that tooth and nail because I just don't want them to have their feet in the door. If somebody wants to voluntarily identify their own cattle, that's great. Government shouldn't have the ability to track what's on your farm.
Oh, they want to do that big style over here. You know, every sheep has a tag, an electronic tag, and if you haven't got them electronic tags when they come out to do the tests or your checks, well, then you find you're penalised, and it's frustrating that you've got to jump through loads of paperwork hoops just to be in exactly the same situation that you would be without all that paperwork. Because
Yeah,
you know every sheep and every cow on your land. Yeah, okay. Let let's tag them if that's what you want. Um, a traceability, but I just find the whole system of farm assured, red tractor. I just find it a job's worth, jobs for the boys, and then they'll import food from Botswana that could have any kind of disease or
right.
fed with anything. So, hello, we it's a crazy situation we're in.
Oh,
We,
sure.
we're worried in Europe at the moment. We've seen foot and mouth in a few European countries. We're trying to lock down Great Britain not to bring imported meats in here, and I just think it's a matter of time before we get foot and mouth. It just
Sure.
seems to me that there there isn't the appetite by governments to really lock things down, protect the farming community. And until there is food shortages, I don't think
Yes.
none of these government policies and government bodies will care until there's no food on the shelves and people start rioting.
Yeah. No, and I thought that would be somewhat of the silver lining that came out of COVID when you saw all of that happening. I thought we would get a little more. And don't get me wrong, it has. I believe that it has woken people up to a point, but not to the extent that I thought it was. And again, until there's food shortages, you're not going to see it. But another thing on the government policy, I mean, for years and years, prior to all this, you would see turkey farms and they would get avian influenza, they get AI in there. And what do? They treat them. They did the best they could to keep them alive. They got them through it. They may have lost a mortality of 15-20%. They may have lost a good number of them, but the ones that came out of that were then immune to that prior strain of avian influenza. But now what are we doing here in the United States? They get one animal in a barn that tests positive, they destroy the whole farm.
Yeah,
They kill. We're killing millions and millions of chickens. We are not building an immunity for these. We are making an absolute mistake with euthanizing these animals. You're not going to stop the spread of it. I'm sorry. It is out there. It's in the wild birds. It's going to spread. What do? It's just like it's say if you got sick, you live in a town of 30,000 people. You test positive for something. Instead of just making sure that you got through it, treating all the people in town, they drop a bomb on the whole place. That's
yeah.
exactly what they are doing, and this is their approach. And
It
again, this
has to
is
be survival of the fittest,
sure,
when they come out the other end, the chickens that survive or the turkeys that survive, they're the ones you're going to be your breed lines for the next generation. So they ain't going
you
to
bet.
get that avian fuel. But it's the same in this country. any sniff of something, and everything's destroyed. Thousands of
Yeah.
birds, millions of birds. And you had the egg bloody panics in the US. I was laughing watching people fighting over buying some 10
They're,
dozen
they're,
eggs.
they're
It's
fighting over eggs, but they euthanized 156 million chickens in that time span. 156 million chickens they euthanize, and they wonder why there's an egg shortage. So what do? Instead of actually solving the root problem, they start importing eggs from Turkey. Like, great. This is it's
yeah.
just astounding to me how smart some people can be. But again, it comes back to regulation and people not understanding what's actually happening, and I believe that they took it away from the children. Um, have you seen this? Because you guys see it more so over there, because your countries are akin to the same size as our states here, and so you're more densely populated. You have a lot more people closer together, so you're a little more able to mobilize and do things. You see the farm protests at Whitehall, and you see the people in Paris, and you see the Dutch, and all of these people, farmers banding together to be able to influence policy. So I attribute that to why you guys are able to move up and down so fast. Whereas here, it's just so big, it's hard to get everybody on the same page. But over there, are you noticing that farmers or ranchers starting to get together a little more, starting to band together as a concerted effort to push back against the government? And what have been the ramifications on the other end of the government pushing back on the farmers?
Oh, definitely. Here in Wales, I would say we're a little bit ahead of what they were in England. So
Mm-hmm.
we've been fighting the Labour government here for 25 years in Wales, which has been, yeah, it's been a journey. But over the last maybe 3 to 4 years, we've raised our voices. We've been a little bit more um, vocal about the problems, and I don't think we can just go out there and protest. I think we have to go out
Mm-hmm.
with a policy, with an idea, with an ideology, so that they can understand that we're not just out there screaming and shouting, well, this and that. We've got things that we need changing. So in Wales, we've got the SFS, which is the Sustainable Farming Scheme, which is supposed to come out next year. Well, every single farmer I've spoken to absolutely hates it. One of the protocols in that was for us to put 10% to woodland and
Mm,
10% to habitat. So literally every farm would lose 20% of what
20%.
they had, which makes no sense. And
But
I
then they'll go build solar panels on the rest of it.
well, this is the craziness we're living. And I am not against trees.
Yeah,
And I'm
sure.
not against, the right tree in the right place, fantastic. But as well, I believe in hedges and edges. I've just put a big double fence, and we put a big hedge through in between me and my cousin on the tops of the mountain. And it's great when you can put something back. But that was a grant that was given by some companies that were taking some electricity cables through the land. So
Oh yeah.
they were putting something back. Of course, they didn't want to put money in your pocket, but we were happy to have that.
For windmills and
Because
solar, I'm sure.
yeah, yeah, and again, it's a carbon store. It'll be
Mhm.
there for my children and my grandchildren, and they might say, "Oh, yeah, Gareth was part of putting that there." He planted that, and I think
Yeah.
that's a nice thing as a farmer, that you're leaving a stamp behind. But going back to policies, then we have TB, tuberculosis within cows in
Yeah.
Wales.
And they're carried by
Absolutely.
badgers, right?
Oh mate, honestly, and nobody listens. Every time I say it's badgers, it's like I did a TV program. You heard of a guy called Brian May?
Mhm.
Yeah, so he's part of the Queen band. So I did a program. So he wants to protect badgers, but they thought they'd found the mystery, a magical um, solution. But I really believe that badgers are the problem, and it's an
Sure.
overpopulation of the creatures. And I'm not against
The
badgers again.
No,
I
they don't
don't
have
want
any
to go out.
natural predators, though, so there's
No,
nothing to
exactly.
manage them.
I don't want to go out and shoot every badger, but what we need to do is address the balance. So when I was a boy on this farm, okay, I was 58 on Monday, and when I was a boy on this farm, I would see hedgehogs all the time. There was a lot
Oh,
of
yeah.
ground nesting birds in this area, but we had no badgers.
Mhm.
Now we have an overpopulation of these creatures, and it is destroying a lot of our wildlife. So it's
Yes.
not just the cows and the farmers are suffering, wildlife suffering because there's an overpopulation. It's a big mammal. It needs a lot of food. It's not just going to eat worms and berries.
Mhm.
So we need to get that out into the, you know, general public's ideology. So they're not just against a depopulation of these
Yeah,
creatures. So all these things are really relevant because that is again a government policy within our country that is very frustrating. And then the
same with
next thing
wolves here.
is
Um,
yeah, is NVZ, so nitrate vulnerable zone. So you would have areas in Wales where these NVZs, nitrate vulnerable zones, so you weren't allowed to carry manure and slurry onto them fields during the winter months because of runoff into the rivers, which is fine. But this government puts it across the board. So every piece of land in Wales then goes into NVZs. Well, again, some farmers are going to have to invest hundreds of thousands into bigger slurry lagoons, into catchment, into
yeah,
putting roofs over their manure heaps. All these things come as an extra pressure financially, mentally, physically to these people who aren't profitable. So, we know how difficult it is to farm, but when
yeah,
it's made more difficult by government policies, and the last one was the Labour policy that came from Westminster, which was the inheritance tax. And I think that
oof,
was the camel or the straw that broke the camel's back, and everybody went out. England, Wales, Scotland, Ireland. We went out to protest, to show our anger. And the sad reality is that they haven't listened, and they're still not listening. They still don't get it. And there's people that are dying. People want to die before next April so that they don't have to pay that inheritance tax. It's a mad world we live in. A mad world.
it is, and it continues to deteriorate. And I think a lot of times it comes back to, in my opinion, for far too long we've just want to be left alone. We want to, farm and ranch and just be left alone. And again, proverbially stuck our head in the sand and didn't get involved in politics, and we didn't get involved in this, and we didn't get involved in that. Well, now the chickens are coming home to roost, and we didn't educate people on what's actually happening. And so people don't understand. And now they're making decisions based on, they know absolutely nothing. These people are absolutely backwards when it comes to it. They don't understand. I mean, my favorite right now is here in the US. They're building carbon pump stations, and what they're doing, and this is happening. If anybody wants to go look it up, go look it up. They're building carbon pump stations. So they suck air out of the atmosphere. They pump that carbon back down under the ground. That's how they're sequestering this carbon. And I don't know if anybody knows this, but when you mix carbon and water, you end up with carbonic acid. Well, carbonic acid dissolves rock. And so now we're pumping carbon back underground. We're mixing it with water in the groundwater. We're dissolving rock underneath there, leaching minerals into our drinking water. Like, what are we doing? It's the same with solar. What's going to happen 20 years down the road when all of these panels are discontinued? What are you going to do to that ground that has been fallowed for the last 20 years? Look at the windmills. We're going to decommission them. Now we're left with these giant hunks of concrete in the ground that you can't get out. I mean, it's going to take an act of God to get most of those out of the ground. And
Yeah.
these are the things we're doing, and we're jumping. This is not a measured approach. I have never seen a measured approach to the green agenda, because don't get me wrong, I all of us want to see a better tomorrow. All of us want to leave the ground better for our kids. I don't know a single farmer, as you said, that wants to see the ground worse off tomorrow, because guess what? Tomorrow the sheep have to come back and graze that again. So you want
Yeah.
as much feed and as much diversity, and you want it to be as good as possible. But yet I've never seen a measured approach from these people who are pushing these agenda. It is an emergency, it is all in, and it is right now, and if you don't do it, you're going to kill everybody on the planet. And that is what they have used to ram through these things that we don't actually know. I mean, look at the American Corn Belt. In the American Corn Belt, during peak production season, removes more carbon out of the atmosphere than the Amazon rainforest does. I mean, this is sequestering carbon back in the ground.
Yeah,
These animals, these grazing animals, the best way to sequester carbon from the atmosphere, graze animals. That is the
yeah.
best way to do it. It's naturally. You build the soil, you do all these things, it's left better. But yet we're going to make these man made machines and pump. This is absolutely asinine and it is completely backwards.
Yeah, and we can't really change this juggernaut. You know, it seems like these politicians and these globalists are on the Titanic, and they're just looking for the next iceberg. To be honest with you, in my opinion, it just looks suicidal. And I think the more you look into it, we've just had our country now. They're talking about going green and putting all these solar panels. This week they've just put 54 million so they can dim the sun.
Yeah,
So they
I'm
can
going to say,
dim the
tell them
sun.
about that a little bit. How do they figure they're going to dim the sun?
So they're gonna lob some balloons or rockets up into the sky or aeroplanes. Then they're gonna get some kind of film that stays there, so it reflects the sun back into the atmosphere.
What could go
Absolute
wrong?
lunacy,
What could
lunacy.
go wrong? I mean, really, what could go wrong? Let's keep messing with the environment. Let's keep doing large scale projects to see how bad we can screw the environment up. That's the way it seems to me. This is nuts. And now you guys are having fires over there. I didn't know you had fires. Actually, I thought it rained too often for you to get fires.
No, we've had some serious fires this spring. For me, it's been the worst I can remember. As in,
Is it on fallowed ground that they've
well,
taken out of production?
it's areas that are mismanaged and aren't grazed enough.
Hmm.
That's
Yeah,
the problem. We need them grazing animals. We've seen what happened in California,
sure,
and again, however we look at it, if it's goats, if it's sheep, if it's cows, if it's ponies, these animals will control the brush on the floor, and it
sure they
will
will.
reduce the spread of that fire. You get a month or 2 months of dry weather, and it's a tinderbox. It's an absolute tinderbox. And yeah, I've done a couple of videos on YouTube if you want to check them out about it. Um, I do get quite a bit of stick for what I do and say, but hey ho, that's the nature of
That's
the beast every now and again.
that's why we're here. I mean that's honestly why we're here. And if something doesn't change soon, you're going to see continued failed policies continue to take over all of this. I think that we are on the precipice of a major collapse agriculturally. There's too many things working against us right now. Too many people that are strapped
Yeah.
to try and get through it because it's just going to take one small thing to set this off, and that is something that honestly keeps me awake at night thinking about. And I think it's something that we can solve, but we have to continue to educate people, even though it feels like pounding our head against the wall that we have to continue to educate these people on what's actually happening, educate the general public so they can see the lunacy in these policies because they're the ones who keep voting for it.
Yeah, I think as well we have to all come together, globally as a industry.
Yes,
Farmers from New Zealand, Australia, and we can say what we want, about imports. We get New Zealand lamb, we get
sure.
Australian lamb, Australian beef. I think we've got to put that to one side now, and we've got to start to work together because it's bigger than every single country. I think if we don't challenge the global agenda against livestock farming, they will, you know,
Yeah,
destroy the majority of what we've got. And I think if we challenge it together and educate the public and get them behind us, and which I honestly do believe they are, the majority of the public are very, very supportive. I'd be
yes,
shocked. Yeah, there's a small, liberal elitist group that pay your taxes. you don't do anything, you run around in it. You're going to get that in life. But,
Yep.
the majority of the hardworking, real people are supportive. And I'm sure that's the same in the USA as well. So if we can do this on a global scale, bring the farmers together and have a farming food revolution worldwide, educating people about how important, the farming industry is and how it needs to be protected by governments, by supermarkets, but by the people.
The people.
Because our job is to produce food affordably, seasonally, in an environmentally friendly way. And to do that, we need to have a fair price for what we do. And that's, I think, the way forward for us to go as farmers, as people, as communities worldwide.
Yeah, and I think we are the same way. I am a big proponent of imports here in the United States. A proponent against tariff or for tariffs on imports because of what's happening to our domestic industries. Because my worry is that someday the United States is already in that predicament. I mean, we are a net importer of food all of a sudden. How did that happen? How have we let ourselves? And I don't think that's good for anybody. I think that every country should make sure that they have theirs taken care of first, and that their people are
Exactly.
taken care of, that their farmers and ranchers are taken care of, and that their people have something to eat that is stable and that is efficient and that is good for them. And I believe that's where we start. But it's unfortunate because I believe we've got ourselves into a position right now where something radical has to happen. And I mean, everybody's getting after Trump for it, but I think something radical does have to happen for this to shake up. And that way, you and I, folks from New Zealand, folks from all over the world can get together as ag producers here and have a concerted effort to grow the market, to grow the red, especially the red meat. I feel like the red meat part of it is crucial, that we get together as livestock growers, dairy products, beef, lamb, those types of things, that we get together and we say, you know what, we know how good these are for people, that they are, as you talked earlier, nutritional dense, and they
Yeah.
have everything you need to survive, that we can continue to give these to people so that their children can be healthy and that they can be healthy, and that we can put a tamp down on a lot of these health epidemics that we have. And we could go off for hours into those kind of things. But I believe that you're absolutely right, that we have to come together, make a concerted effort going forward, and to really make sure that our countries are taken care of and then expand. Because if we grow that market, there's going to be room for everybody.
100%. We've a growing population worldwide. Some of the poorer nations now have more extra money, so they're gonna want their steaks, they're gonna want their lamb shanks, they're gonna want their chops, and I think there's a market for every single country to be
Yes.
producing it as long as we get a fair price.
Thanks for joining us today. If you enjoyed this episode, hit that like button, subscribe to the podcast, and make sure you turn on your notifications so you know when we release a new episode. Thanks again, and we'll see y'all soon.